Hello, everyone, on this Thursday afternoon. Thank you for joining us on another wonderful Crowdcast. I'm Stephen Green, NPC. I'm going to mute some people right now. Muted. We're having a conversation today about an effort that was launched 11 days ago. Do more, do better. It's a bottom-up effort that I launched 11 days ago, and so far we've got more than 350 people signed up from over 250 companies. And Do is about doing more and taking action and really helping be accountable for centering the experiences and outcomes for the folks that we have in our communities that we want to see, companies and organizations and industries do better by. I've got a wonderful group with me today that I'll be having this conversation about do for. Before they introduce themselves, let's give a hand of applause to Rick Tarosi, who is behind the scenes doing the illustrious work of managing the chat. And you'll see in the bottom of your screen, you'll see ask a question. Feel free to hit on that and put your question there in the queue instead of in the chat. Use the chat for shouting people out. I see Chris already did a fist bump. We got Marquita saying what's up to everybody. And as we move along, we'll get to the point where I start answering those questions, and we'll go through it that way. As usual, whenever we do a Crowdcast, we have our unofficial liquid sponsor, Reverend Nat's Hard Cider. If you haven't had the Saint Citron, it is perfect for a summer day. I highly recommend it. Thank you for Mr. Nat West for creating this lovely libation. All right, so with that, let's get into who we got on deck here before we start dragging, talking, doing the hard-hitting stuff that we love to do together. Miss Ciara Pressler, will you please introduce yourself and tell us about why you're here?
Thanks. My name's Ciara Pressler. I have a company called Pregame, officially Pregame Incorporated, and we do coaching and consulting for small businesses, organizations. I'm here because I trust Stephen as a leader. I'm here because I think Portland is a very peculiar place for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think we do some things right. I think we do some things very wrong. And I'm not afraid to call out some of that. And I also think there's a difference between calling out and accountability. I'm very tired of companies saying that they care about diversity and not doing anything. And I think it's time for those companies to be, to either stop talking or to start doing. There's nothing in between anymore. And so that's why I'm here today.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next up, let's go with Miss Kristen Gallagher. Please introduce yourself.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really honored to be here next to these three amazing people. In fact, people I've looked up to over the last few years. So I founded and I currently run a company called Edify. We have actually shifted into being software. We build software to onboard engineers better. But over the last 6 years, I've been really, deeply a part of the Portland startup world. And unfortunately, have had the pleasure and sometimes displeasure of working with a lot of local companies. And although I'm not a DEI practitioner or expert, I leave that work up to some amazing people who have that background and that skill. I'm very adjacent to a lot of that work through manager development, new hire onboarding, all of that kind of stuff, change management. And I get to see companies do it wrong all the time. And it's really frustrating to see people having signed various pledges or activities, or even to have a DEI practitioner on staff, but actually not giving them the headspace and the resources to actually do that work effectively. And so I really am here to talk about power structures in companies and change management and how you actually can do this work and elevate it so that it actually changes your business for the better. So that's what I want to talk about today.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kristen. And last and not least, we have Mr. Carter. Please introduce yourself. That's not me. I don't know what that is. That's on your end, Marcus, apparently. Let's try again.
All right. Hold on. Let's see if we can figure this out.
Sounds so much better. Thank you.
All right.
And how you're
Okay, is this better now?
Ish. Now you're good.
All right. Let's see if this works. If this doesn't work, I'm counting on my peers to give me sort of a thumbs up here. So first and foremost, I'm fortunate to work at Instrument, which is a creative design agency here in Portland. Also fortunate to be in the equity and inclusion space and work with a number of clients. Very fortunate to also be an organizer, and I help organize with Critical Resistance as well as Care Not Cops. And the reason I am here today is because, the recent events, as it relates to Breonna Taylor, as it relates to, George Floyd, and just this 2.0 version of Black Lives Matter has really elevated the conversation about, equity, diversity, and inclusion programs in the workforce that omit social justice themes, that appear to work nice within the workforce, but as soon as you leave those doors, what happens? So I'm excited to be a part of this panel. Definitely excited anytime, Stephen says, hey, let's have a conversation. It just so happens this one will happen out loud. So I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. So I picked the three of you very, very, very specifically. And Marcus, I think, really represents a specific focus around diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and how that's kind of evolved in the Portland ecosystem over the years. For Kristen, it's very much around the connection to business and operations and scaling companies. And oftentimes, I think DEI work is seen as separate and not part of that. But I think you do an amazing job of showing the business case and how they are unequivocally connected. And then Ciara represents the fact that all these companies are run by people, really, really amazing, great people that are figuring these things out and doing the best with what they have. But I don't want us to ever lose sight of the fact that it's people running companies, and we want to be able to center people and their experiences whenever we can, and not say this brand, this company, because all these companies are still made up of people, and they generally always started with one or two people in mind. And so they scale from there. And so with that, Kristen, I want to kind of kick things off from you, because you've been doing this operational work and kind of connecting the dots and helping a lot of these companies scale here in the region. Can you give us kind of a time lapse of what you see happening in this work, and kind of end us on the moment that we find ourselves in today, and how companies are finding themselves either ready to take this on, or like, oh crap, we weren't prepared for this, and now this is a really uncomfortable time?
Yeah, I can definitely talk a little bit about that. So I'll back up all the way into 2014 and 2015, and I actually started consulting. I built my company, or I started my company in 2014, but I actually started consulting for a local company called Elemental. And some of you might know that Elemental's now passed away, but former founder and CEO was Sam Blackman. And Sam, I think, had a really great heart, and Sam really wanted to work with, at the time, an organization that we know as Prosper Portland. It used to be called PDC, Portland Development Commission. He really wanted to put together some sort of coalition or pledge, and as well as a number of other people. And so he partnered with that organization, and it's a lot more complex than that, so I'm kind of skipping over. But what ended up coming out of that was the Tech Town Tech Pledge. And I was actually at Elemental when we were sort of implementing the very first year of that Tech Pledge. And the immediate kind of frustration that I had as soon as I got off kind of our first call on how we were going to start this work, quote unquote, was that there actually wasn't a structure. It was that, you know, a bunch of companies had signed a pledge that said, you know, vaguely, we are going to do better, and we're committed to diversity, which is sort of a starting place. I'm not going to say it's the best starting place at all. But fast forward, I ended up having a lot of frustration trying to work through that kind of curriculum, if you will, from that the Tech Pledge sort of tried to put together. I would not call it curriculum as a curriculum designer myself, but it tried to provide a platform for the Portland tech kind of ecosystem. And I think for some people, it really opened the doors and it opened their eyes for the first time. But what ended up happening kind of a couple of years into it was that the same people started showing up, and they were the same people who were being marginalized by those companies that they worked for. And what ended up happening is you'd have these CEO calls, and CEOs would have conversations and say, yep, we're going to do better. And then the people that actually showed up to do that work and have the roundtables and do the design thinking workshops were the people who didn't need to be educated. Like, they were the people who this company was sort of outsourcing their actual work to, and refusing to actually do their own work, right? And when I say own work, I'm sure that Marcus can talk a little bit more to this, but your own work is executives and board members and people who make the rules and make the culture actually examining what the power structures at play are, what are the rules, the policies, the ways that we do work now in this company. How are these things potentially racist, sexist, ableist? How are these things hurting our employees and hurting our community? And that, unfortunately, was not a conversation that people wanted to have. And so over the last 5 or 6 years, I've kind of watched this become a political football of sorts, where you see local leaders of these various companies kind of get really excited that they have solved a diversity issue that they feel like, you know, has been quote unquote solved in their company, and so they're going to export this plan out into the world because they feel like it's the best plan or it's the best way to do it. And I don't believe that there is one best way. I think you have to do a lot of work of listening to your employees, listening to your community. But to fast forward us to today, I think that about 2 months ago, a lot of companies really found themselves completely unprepared to answer what their employees and what their community needed to hear from them. I remember, I won't name names here, but I remember during the sort of Black Lives Matter 1.0 national conversation, an HR leader coming to me. I was actually in the bathroom in this company, and she came to me and she was like, "What should we do? Should we say something?" And it's like, saying something is like so not where we need to be right now. We need to sit, like, you cannot come to me in the bathroom and ask for a policy statement or something to fix this, right? We have 2 people of color who work at this company of more than 200 people. That's not, and you and I are white, right? We are not going to solve this problem in that way. And I think frequently you see people who are interested in making this go away because it's uncomfortable, right? This work is extremely uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for people of color because they have to listen and have to watch people continue to marginalize them. But it's also, it's intentionally uncomfortable for people who are mostly, who are white or who are coming from a place where they don't examine this kind of conversation in their work or in their daily life. And so if we recognize that you're bringing that into your work, then we have to recognize that your work is built in a racist structure, right? And so I think that's where we are today. I don't want to talk too long, but I feel like where we are today is companies still don't have a framework because they haven't put in the real work. They're looking for Band-Aids. They're looking for things to kind of put on top of the problem. And the problem is a power structure, a conversation about systemic racism that is much, much more complicated and longer term to have, and isn't going to get solved with like changing your LinkedIn logo, you know, in one day, right?
Woo. Woo. Wow. All right, we're heating up. Thank you very much, Kristen. Marcus, let's jump to you, because I think your perspective is poignant here as a connection point to what Kristen just kind of laid out from a real kind of macro level of the timeline. You've been involved doing DEI work here on the ground. You've been in all of these different conversations. What's changing? What's getting better? And you know, I want to try and continue to connect things to do. What do you see actions that are happening? What are the actions that are not happening? And kind of what's missing from the conversations that some are being had, some aren't being had, but what don't we know?
Right. I've been doing calls all day and I ran a 2-hour workshop, so I don't know what's going on here. Is the sound any better right now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Awesome. So I can't, in good faith, say anything is changing just yet. You know, y'all know me by now. I'm gonna keep it real, right? You know, can't say anything is changing just yet, but I think what we're experiencing is people are starting to hopefully trust the experience of BIPOC folks, right? And I think in the past, people aren't willing to use the voices in their workforce as data, right? So whether you're 2 out of 200 or you happen to be 30% of that, you know, 200, and you raise a concern, you know, leadership has to believe that is actually happening under their watch, that they have produced an inequitable, discriminatory environment. And I think with this explosion of, you know, the 2.0 version, I would say, you see people looking around, scratching their head and actually saying, this is happening. We believe you, right? So step one have been companies doing town halls, right? Companies actually being more explicit in reaching out to their Black employees. But even then, that's problematic because it's as if you were never listening to them. It's as if you don't have sort of an inventory of concerns in which they've asked you to address in the past. So I would just highlight that I think people are definitely listening, and I think they believe these experiences are happening. Whether or not there's action that comes out of that, I think we're just too early to address at the moment.
Thanks, Marcus. Also, our IT team just checked in. They said Marcus getting some headphones might be very helpful.
Let me work on that.
All right. Before we get into the questions, I'd love for you, Ciara, to kind of chime in. You were behind the scenes working with me, talking with me about you. Tell us about, you know, why action is important right now, and what role it plays in kind of being part of the problem and not prolonging, you know, the trauma that so many people are experiencing.
Can you say that again? It was echoing a bit, the question.
Yes. Why is action so important right now? And tell me about what that looks like for you. Yeah. And as far as, you know, you chiming in and helping us out in kind of crafting what do looks like, how does action resonate for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, you are what you do, right? Your values are what you do. And so I think it's very stylish, especially in like startups, to have a mission, vision, values on the website, but they're completely meaningless if your actions are contrary to them. And so, you know, I always refer to business as a game, hence the name pregame, right? And if you're going to play the game, you know, don't draw the card that says post values on the website and then not play that hand. Do you know what I'm saying? You don't get to have it both ways, where you get to just say the words but not back it up with action. And then, you know, these days we get so upset if somebody points out you said one thing and you're doing another. Well, if you're not prepared to do the action, don't say it. I've been using an example, you know, I know a 60-something old Portland, you know, money white guy who owns a business that very much has like a white customer base, and all his employees are like white, and I don't have a problem with that, because he's not out there being like diversity, and I'm all about diversity, and our values are all about. It doesn't really bother me. What bothers me is when companies say they value diversity and then they don't do anything about it, because they don't value it then. They're lying. And if that's something you publish, anytime that you do PR around a thing or you publish a thing publicly, you are inviting criticism. If you were doing these things behind closed doors, I wouldn't advocate exposing you necessarily, you know, unless it's with our tax dollars, and that's why I'm very critical of Prosper Portland's diversity initiatives. But, you know, don't do the talk without the action, or we will point it out. And then, you know, the big thing that I advocated for when you were putting together the Do More pledges is including services in supporting Black-owned businesses. And, you know, as we move the conversation, I'm sure we'll be talking more about other traditionally disadvantaged groups in the near future, as we have been for a long time. And, you know, I worry that there's the thought of like, oh, I'll buy a candle or I'll buy some food and that's enough. Or, you know, we all like to point out dead stock because it's the best, but it's not hard, and there's no risk involved, and there's no overturning of your own internalized white supremacy to buy a meal from the population whose role it has been to make your meals for all of American history. Where there is a risk and a crack in the white supremacist structure is when you hand your money over to, when you hand your business over to. And so I want this changing over to patronizing more Black-owned businesses to be about, is your lawyer Black? Is your accountant Black? Is your business coach Black? Is your realtor Black? Is your bank Black-owned? Because, you know, it's all fine and good for, you know, mama to make you some fried chicken, but what happens about getting advice on how you live your life or run your business?
Whew, I have the best friends in the entire world. Thank you so much. You know, one of the things this makes me think about is Rick interviewed Stephanie Ghostin Paul a few weeks ago, and she introduced, to me at least, maybe it wasn't new for other people, was this idea developed by Dr. Barbara Love, of a liberatory consciousness, and she broke down that it has four legs to the stool, and it has so much to do with how change happens when we're working in systemic racism. And the four legs were awareness, analysis, action, and accountability. And she talked about how you've got to be able to do all four. And when people are feeling uncomfortable, our natural inclination as human beings is make the discomfort go away. And so people will jump to action, or they'll just avoid awareness whatsoever, but they're less inclined to lean in on analysis and centering like, well, here's what I'm comfortable doing because I want this to go away, versus let me do some analysis and figure out how do I center really my action around the people that are impacted. And then we all really struggle when it comes to accountability. and what that looks like. And it sounds like oftentimes the accountability piece comes, it manifests as, this cancel culture or calling out versus, no, you said A, B, and C publicly, and then and you made it a public conversation. Now I'm asking for a public conversation that may critique what you said in A, B, and C, but the public conversation was started by you. You just don't want the accountability to go along with it. And so, I continue to think about what Stephanie introduced us to and align it whenever I see something happening is, where's the awareness, where's the analysis, where's the action, and where's the accountability that goes along with it, and having all of those be part of it. So we've got 10 questions already into the queue. I'm going to jump into those. I'm going to answer the first one for Nat West really quick. How do I pay my entry fee for tonight's education? Keep making amazing cider and supporting the community like you do, because we love it. Please do it more. Thank you. The next question with 7 upvotes is, a few days ago, the PBJ, Portland Business Journal, published an article on the gut-wrenching lack of diversity hiring in Oregon, even after years of companies doing DEI training, etc. What are some of the key ways we can push past this dangerous inertia and lack of action? And that was from Kim. Thank you, Kim. Who wants to jump in on that question? Raise a hand. There you go, Kristen.
Well, I think Marcus had his hand too. Marcus, do you want to go first? No? Okay. So, and I'll be quick in case Marcus wants to add in. Okay, so I think, and that's my view right here is companies hiring, because I think that economic mobility, and to Ciara's point earlier, moving money around in who you're getting services from, where you're buying sort of goods from, all of that, it also extends to who you hire and where you're hiring from. And we had this conversation, for really, frankly, the last 20 years, that it's a pipeline problem. It's a pipeline problem. We don't have enough people of color. We don't have enough women, et cetera, et cetera. That's just, it's not true, factually. And we have excellent people who are mid, senior, VP level, CEO level, BIPOC people, disabled people, all kinds of people. We just don't choose to look for them. I think Portland is I'm just gonna come out here like I'm from the East Coast. Portland is lazy on so many levels. And it's like, let me just put this out onto LinkedIn and see if I can hire a few people, right? And guess what? That only goes so far, right? Like, this is like basic, 101 level stuff, right? If you know mostly white people, then your LinkedIn connections are going to be mostly white people, and that has a network effect, right? So the level of sharing is just not going to get you diverse candidates, right? And this is also Marcus's wheelhouse, so I won't talk too much on that. But so we have to be doing active recruiting for hiring people. And on the other half of it, we have to be actively understanding the environment that folks we are recruiting into have to work in, right? Because if you're not ready to bring people into your environment because you have not dealt with your power structures and your internalized racism, you don't need to be doing that recruiting, right? Because you're doing more harm than good, right? So today is not the day for you to say, I'm going to go out and recruit a bunch of BIPOC people, women, right? Today's not that day. Today is the day for you to look at what is happening in your structures inside of your company and run through what your process is. What are your policies? How open are you? Where have those things been influenced by racism, right? And that might be really painful and hard to look at and takes a long time before you're ready to do that work. So I wonder if Marcus has some thoughts on that too.
Go ahead, Marcus. Sorry, Marcus, I need to unmute you. My bad.
All right. So I think, first and foremost, organizations have to see specifically Black people holistically, right? Like, your methodology of just showing up with a check hasn't been working, right? And you know, we talked about like, what does the internal environment look like? People have work to do when all you can do is showcase stock photos of people who look like me, right? Like, you don't understand where I'm at in the community, and if I'm hooking up with my people, it's likely not in your conference room in the shirt and tie, right? So like, really get an understanding of like people holistically, where we're at, you know, how to grab a seat at the table with us. Stop asking us to grab a seat at the table with you, right? Bring some equity into your perspective, right? Like, we need to do that first and foremost before we think about, you know, showing up in these environments. So again, I think one is actually see people holistically. It's very dangerous narrative to look at Black people or any people simply as narrative. I mean, as labor, knowing sort of the social historical context of that, right? When we see organizations talking about like more diversity is going to affect the bottom line, that's a very dangerous narrative given the history of our country, right? So there's so many areas that organizations need to unpack first and foremost in order to get it right. And I think more often than not, if they actually listen to their employees who are in that seat, they would help them. But with that hierarchy, with that power structure, you can't believe that the individual contributor who came in at whatever level could actually inform your analysis, right? We're seeing organizations posting statements with no analysis. That's why the follow-up is so bad. That's why the accountability doesn't make sense. There's no analysis there at all of what the issue is. I think I said this earlier today, but there's a saying about like solutions are created based on how the problem is defined. You need some analysis to understand what's the actual problem and then to build the solution off of that. If you are in absence of any analysis, of course, you're always going to swing and you're going to miss.
Thanks, Marcus. Do you have anything to add, Ciara?
I just want to say the ultimate accountability is money. If the business isn't making money, it's not going to exist. So if you vote with your money, which is part of the Do More pledge, you know, it's very easy. We live in a capitalist system. Businesses are about making money. So if you shop there, you're supporting all the things that they're doing and allowing them to survive. So if you don't like what they're doing, don't shop there. You know, we sometimes are lazy about it, myself included. I do think we can be lazy about it in Portland. You know, whatever your other values are, it's every time I buy something from Amazon, I'm like, ugh, you know, I try not to do it. I'm not 100%, but, you know, and that's not a diversity issue. It's about Jeff Bezos and how he runs his money, but, you know, it's money.
Right. Yeah, I think about a few years ago, there was a restaurant that opened up in Northeast Portland called British Colonial. And I'll never forget, you know, it was on my bike ride home and biking by, and there was 300-400 people outside protesting and up in arms. Meanwhile, 2 blocks away, there was a Black-owned business that had no customers. And I just think to myself, what an amazing act of protest it would have been for those folks to, you know, maybe still give some input and feedback on what was going on at British Colonial, but to also go and say like, hey, we've got money, we eat 3 times a day, we're going to go to this Black business right down the street and we're going to protest with our money right there. And you know, I think, you know, someone said this before, you know, Portland loves to have a Black Lives Matter sign, not always doing things that show Black lives actually matter. Because it's enough just to have the sign, like, look, I got the sign, like, we're good. Keep pushing. All right, we're going to move on to the next. Oh, Marcus, go ahead.
I think
we're talking about, you know, or at least I hinted at relationship building and seeing people holistically. I was reading something the other day that said, I am my relations, right? So if the network of that organization doesn't even mix it up in these communities, they have no chance, no shot. Again, I am my relations. So, the comment earlier about like Portland being lazy, that's part of it, right? You thought you could just ask a question and abracadabra, bam, there it goes. Nah, build that relationship. Stop positioning yourself as a vendor, right? First and foremost, right? And how are you a long-term, builder, community builder, if you will. So again, this idea that I am my relations, a lot of organizations need to take note of that. And if you were to look at what's the demographics of their referral population, probably reflects what the inside looks like.
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, that's a really good point. I did an engagement with a good friend of mine with a company locally a few years ago, and it was around DEI work. And the first question that my friend asked was, "When was the last time you had a person of color over for dinner?" And the CEO thought about it, and he just said, "I can't remember." And she said to him, "Well, if you're not doing it in your personal life, the other 16 hours of the day, it's going to be really hard to be able to, focus and cultivate an authentic relationship with folks during your workday." And so she was trying to draw the connection between, we show up to work and companies and volunteer stuff and, civic things as our own human being selves. And it's all connected. So I appreciate it. We're going to go on to the next question. Done with that one. Thank you, Kim, again for asking that one. The next one comes from Miss Pressler, so I'll definitely focus it to her. Why does Portland continue to elevate white, straight, cis men as diversity experts? Whew, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a fun topic. When I talk to my business friends in other cities, I'm like, you guys will not believe this. In Portland, white guys can like have a thought and then say they're diversity experts, and then they get press on it. Like they really are. Like they get articles on them and they get added to lists of diversity change makers. And my friends in other cities like New York and San Francisco and every other city are like, wait, what? Like I don't think this happens in other places. And I think the bigger issue is that maybe it's partly the laziness, but like we're so nice in Portland that we're not critical, and it's just easy to ask a question or think critically about certain things. I want to tack this on because I really want to talk about this. Before George Floyd was murdered, a few weeks before, and before everyone woke up, some people for the first time, and now they're experts because they read White Fragility in the last 2 months, which is an excellent book, by the way. Please read it, but you're not an expert. Prosper Portland awarded these diversity grants to a number of companies. It's public. It's listed on their website. I applied for this grant for pregame. I didn't get it. I wrote a long email about why the awardees were ridiculous. Like they're awarding multi-million-dollar, white male-owned, very white companies these diversity grants to do things like educate our staff on diversity, with $5,000 or $10,000 of taxpayer money. That's what funds Prosper Portland. I don't want my money that I pay in tax. And then they kind of wrote it off as sour grapes. I bet if I had written that email after George Floyd, once everyone started listening to me, they would have responded differently. But these are the kinds of things that, like, why am I the only person to write them that email? Like everyone who's here, if you see Prosper Portland publish, like, we awarded 12 diversity grants today, and you click through to the blog post and you see like, those are really white companies, like everyone should be calling them out because that's your money going to well-paid people to do the right thing. We shouldn't fund that. They should fund that themselves. I mean, you should still send the email. It's ridiculous. And so Is there anything I'm saying that's unclear of like why that is so ridiculous? Because I want to be very clear. Like, why do my tax dollars need to go to a white male-owned business with an all-white leadership team so they can work on diversity? That's the opposite of reparations. That's insulting.
Kristen, you said you worked for this.
Ciara and I might have been like dealing with the same sort of background. I mean, I got on a phone call before I chose not to apply similarly for my company, Edify. And I was actually talking to somebody at Prosper and explained why I felt like Edify could benefit from one of these grants, because, you know, all of our team right now is contractors. They're not full-time employees. And I wanted to be able to hire someone as a full-time employee with benefits as a small business, you know, side note, not being required to give those benefits actually, but wanted to create a more level playing field because a lot of my other team was able to not have those benefits. And they basically told me, you know, like, you're not really the profile of company that we're looking for. And, you know, it's not really going to like make a difference in your company. And I was like, okay, well, I've been out here like teaching the companies that you have been giving this money for 6 years, and you just kind of keep funneling more money into those companies. So it's great that like I'm not going to be able to benefit from any of that. And it's really not like me or Edify that's benefiting. It's the people that we're going to be able to hire, that you're helping my business extend its reach in a way that I'm not able to right now. And again, it was like crickets. It was like, well, you know, I'm sorry, you're not really eligible. And it's like, okay, well, I see where your priorities are. And, you know, all you have to do is go and turn over, you know, the staff book basically, and look at who works there, right? Like who works in City Hall, who works at Prosper Portland. Have we had a conversation about the systemic racism that organization actually was built on? And I think people don't really realize, I mean, I know everybody on this call does know, at least these 4 people, but, you know, PDC wasn't here to help economic development. PDC was a real estate development company trying to gentrify and push people out of Portland, right? And so those sorts of things, it's like biological magnification down the line. When you don't address these things systemically, you come up with what Ciara is talking about. So those are my words.
Thank you. Marcus, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add, brother.
It's already been said.
All right, thank you. Oh, Ciara, go ahead.
Can I just add something about the critical thinking? You know, right now it's cool to like donate publicly or give a grant or something. And I applied for one grant that was for like Black women-owned businesses in COVID, and the grant ended up being $100. And it was like, and we can use your picture and logo and blah, blah, blah and everything. And I gave it back. I was like, give it to somebody who needs it more, but 100, like, that's not a grant. Like, you can't do anything with that in business. And not to be ungrateful, but like, that's like lower than you would need to pay to get someone to be a spokesperson for, like, it's so read the text, the small text in these things. You know, like right now, Visa is giving away $10,000 grants. That's good money, but it's not a lot of money, you know?
And Ciara, what you're talking about, the hoops that we make people of color jump through to get $100, right? Like, it's criminal, you know. It is like the amount of time, like Ciara's time is worth at least $300 an hour, right? Having been coached by Ciara, I can tell you, you know, it's like, so she's going to work for 3 hours on this grant. Okay, that's $900 to get $100. She is negative on that interaction, right? And this happens all the time. You know, it's like, oh, we're doing such a good job. We've put out this grant. We're going to have this internship at $17 an hour. You know, we're so proud of ourselves.
Thank you. All right, next question. What are some good methods to push executive leadership to do more when what they are doing doesn't feel like enough, from the perspective of not being part of the executive leadership team. So that's a big tenet of what Do is all about, is empowering the people that may not be in the C-suite, but still want to be equipped of helping move their company forward. So I'd love to hear who wants to start on this one. Marcus, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to offer this, and people say like, "Oh, this is a cliche sort of thought," but it really does depend on the relationship, right? Just like I want people to build relationship with me and my community. If you're an individual contributor and you're trying to get your CEO to listen, you got to find a way to lock into that relationship and start to build that influence. And the reason why I say like you're trying to influence their analysis of what the problem actually is. You can't just float them the Forbes article or what you saw on LinkedIn. They're not going to get it. They got to sit with you and actually have some sort of principled struggle on what they believe the issue actually is. And if they can't move from that interaction and say, I got to step up because someone is holding me accountable, someone actually is communicating their live experience, you got to get out of that organization then, right? If you have that FaceTime and you're helping increase their analysis and they're still failing to see it, I don't know what's going to help them. So you do have to bank on that relationship. And again, I've seen people do it various different methods, but stop just floating an executive, an article, or asking a executive team to look at something. That's not working.
Anybody else want to chime in there?
Ciara, do you have anything before I jump in? I think that some of you might have heard the story. When I was in 5th grade, I got a punishment to read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. We can talk about why I got that punishment later, but it was an amazing book. Basically it taught me tact. How do I talk to somebody about something they don't currently agree with me on? And I think we walk a fine line here, right? Because it is not on BIPOC people or women to explain their experience and to convince someone else to believe them. Like, that is not their job, right? And so to Marcus's point, if you are trying to talk to an executive, you're trying to share and explain your own experience, and you keep getting shut down, regardless of how you're doing it. I think the reason I bring up the How to Win Friends and Influence People is because there are some really useful tools in there to help people, and bunches of other resources too, but some really good tools to help you have a more productive conversation. But even if you're doing the right things from a communication and conflict management point, and you're still getting shut down, don't spin your wheels. Don't waste your batteries in this organization. They don't deserve it, right? They're not compensating you for that time. You need to go, right? And as somebody who coaches a lot of job seekers, like, you should find that job while you have a job, because it's a lot easier to move that way. But it's just not worth trying to move somebody from here to here if they're over here, right? If it's just like 1 inch every year, it's not your job to do that.
Also, I would just say, as an organizer, you have to understand who has influence in your organization outside of the CEO, right? And how do you start to inform their analysis? How do you start to actually gain critical mass? So, I apologize because maybe I'm speaking from a place of privilege and knowing I can go to a CEO, and some folks don't have that option. So I want to be, open and hold space for that. But again, figure out how to organize within your organization, figure out who are some of those influencers, start helping them with their own education and analysis, and try to build that critical mass. That's a part of what, the do piece is, right? It's slowly starting to get those different pieces in place to inform, and then start to build and fan those flames, if you will.
Thank you. So we've got 10 minutes left, and we have more questions, but having three people like yourself is a rarity for us. And I think it's really, really important that people hear from you and hear from your specific perspectives about, action and what this moment really, really means from folks that have been on the front lines. And so I want to take the last now 9 minutes for each of you to take a stab at, like, if there's one thing that I can do that's either part of what people signed up for do or not, and I can start with one thing from your perspective. What is that? Let's start with Marcus.
Yeah, so I would love to see more Black and just Latinx, trans, queer, people of color in general. Let's amplify those voices. Like, there's a part of me that understands when I'm with the community, we're hyping each other up. But I'd love to hop online and see someone else. I'm like, what? How did you know X? How did you know this person? Showing them love. And I want to see that person smile, their joy, and be like, damn, Marcus, I was having a good day. Did you see that? Like, I want to feel that, right? It shouldn't always have to come from us on the call, right? Like, I want other folks to make people feel, beloved. Like, I really want that deep down inside. And that's what's desperately missing. If there's one last thing I'll just sort of close with, I want us to keep in mind that accountability is not a destination. It's a skill we can build in practice, right? Like, for some reason, we think we can hit it. No, this is a skill you continue to build and you continue to practice. So, take all the bullet points and know you got to continue. Because that moment I get that call from somebody that's like, yo, it was bomb because such and such was lifting me up. I don't even know who this person is, but they was lifting me up. I'm getting business. We're doing great things. Like, I really want that.
That's awesome. That's great. I love that, Marcus. Yeah, it was, I don't know if everyone saw it, but there was an unfortunate scenario that happened. There was an Asian family having dinner at a restaurant in California, and white dude started going off and saying some pretty racist things. And I loved how the woman that was the waitress, she got fired up, and she actually placed her body in between the family and this guy that was delivering this business. And she told him unequivocally, like, you need to leave. And it was so amazing to see a scenario where, people weren't looking around and be like, okay, well, the Asian folks have to protect themselves. No, like, the woman realized the privilege she had as a white woman who was in that moment, and she leaned in hard and made sure they didn't have to be the ones defending themselves. She stepped and literally physically put herself in harm's way in doing so. And I think that's what being an accomplice looks like. I don't think we need more allies, but I definitely think we need more accomplices. So who wants to go next?
Yeah, it's hard to just summarize. I think that the most important thing to me on the Do Pledge is constructive accountability, right? Positive peer pressure. Like I said, calling out is like exposing something that's private, or doing something to make someone embarrassed, but you can hold people accountable if they did something publicly. And again, that critical thinking, is especially the women on this crowdcast, you probably have heard of the Bechdel test. Like, once you learn the Bechdel test, you can never watch a movie the same way again. The Bechdel test is like, for a movie to pass or a work of art to pass the Bechdel test, it's like there has to be more than one woman in it. The two women have to have a conversation, and it's not about the man, and then you realize, like, no movie passes that, and it's so simple. And it's like, bring that same thing to business. Like, I don't know, I'll have to do a blog on what the business version of that would be, but there's a person of color in leadership, there's more than one, and they actually get to make decisions or something, and it's that piece about don't go to an event where the whole speaking panel is white. And I want all of you to channel your inner Karen and tweet at the event organizer, because that is a public act. You know, call it out. That is an absolutely valid call out. Like, hey, I noticed that none of your speakers are people of color, or there's only people of color on this. I don't understand how we can get a full view. I'll give another specific example that's about women, but because I always am looking around like, am I the only person who's seeing this? Like with the diversity blog from Prosper, or at TEDx Portland a few years ago, I think it was one of Marcus's colleagues, the gentleman did a TED talk from Instrument on art or creativity, and he listed like 20 or 30 influences in his career, and they were like all guys. And I was looking around like, is anyone else seeing, like, how come every ad agency, the art director is always a white guy with glasses wearing all black with white shoes? Like, how is that creative? Why, you know, like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. How does no one else see this? So like pointing things out like that, like you just said all of your influences are white European men. Like, how are you creative? You know, just, I don't think I can talk anymore. I think I'm out. Well, I will say one more thing since I have the mic, which is I have experienced more stabs to my heart in the last 8 weeks than my whole time in Portland combined, with white people being offended when I like say, no, I can't speak at your event right now. Like, understand what emotional labor is and how much energy it takes to be part of an event like this. And so I can't do it all the time, you know, and it's not, don't get all butthurt if I say no, especially if it's not paid, you know, and don't tell me how to do diversity. I've been thinking about diversity, you know, for 14 years of my marketing career. I've been thinking about it beyond the last 2 months. So I've had a lot of kind of like white-splaining also, because people are just thinking about this for the first time, so they're hyper conscious about it. Trust me, I've been thinking about it for longer. I got this.
Yeah, there's a commercial from FedEx from the 80s, and in the commercial there's people around a conference room table, and a guy on the side of the table says, hey, we can save a lot of money by shipping with FedEx. And everyone's like, no. And then that guy at the head of the table, a white guy in a really nice suit, says, I have an idea. We can save a lot of money by shipping with FedEx. And everyone's like, brilliant idea, blah, 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 blah. And the guy that said it originally was like, I just said that. And they're like, no, you totally didn't say that. He said it. And like, you know, oftentimes things aren't important until, you know, the white man in charge says that they're important. And then it's only important to the realm that he's comfortable with it being important. So Kristen, love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll be short. And again, I'm a process operations kind of person, right? So I am curious if all, you know, any of you run businesses, or if you are in a leadership role at businesses and you have, say, like a team meeting or an executive team meeting, can you extend that meeting by 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and specifically have a conversation every week about what is going on in your organization? How are you all thinking about this? And be mindful too that, you know, for example, I was recently made aware of a situation where this company involved decided they were going to do a book club on white fragility. And so they got a, you know, white fragility copy for everybody. Well, your people of color in your organization probably don't need to read white fragility, right? And they probably don't need to be in a book club on white fragility, you know, just an idea here. And so that was clearly, you know, like Ciara said, people who have just become awake to something, kind of saying like, oh my God, we all need to talk about this right now. It's so important. So, you know, if you are in a circumstance where, let's say, you are a small company and you're all white, or you're an executive team and you're all white. That's an appropriate way to do it. There's also a bunch of other books that are written by people of color that you can read. But I think that a lot of this starts with active facing uncomfortable things, right? And that's why I'm asking for 30 minutes at the end of every, or at the beginning of every executive meeting. And can you talk about, like, oh man, our hiring process might be problematic. What can we do, right? And start to make, once you have these conversations, start to make goals that are actionable, that you can actually put, a pin in them and say, we're trying to get here. But don't bite off more than you can chew, because, and certainly don't go out and tell the world that this is where you're at, because Ciara's point too, the moment you make this stuff public, you are inviting critique. And that is the realm of public life, right? And so don't go and announce these things before you've done the work and before you've worked through some of this, right? And to Marcus's point, there's no there, right? This is a continuous learning process. This will always change. Humanity is always changing, right? I was thinking about this this phrase where, it's like good enough isn't good enough, it's not enough. And it's not, we don't need to be angry or offended when people critique us because what we are doing is not enough, because the reality is it's probably never going to be enough, right? It's a process, right? And there's a backfill, right? A backlog of things that we can't fix right now. We can't go back in time and fix those things. We have to be cognizant of what we can do over time in the future. So it's always not going to be enough. And just being comfortable in that discomfort is a skill that you need to cultivate.
Thank you so very much. I think, I love how you all have continued to lean in all this stuff and have been part of doing the work long before it was glamorous work to be doing. And firsthand how imperfect it is, and that it's work, and there is no words like done or perfect or, we're there. There is no end in sight. If anyone takes something away from this, is I want folks to take away the amazing human beings that we have in our midst that are helping make change happen. And that can be you. It doesn't matter what it says on your card or your title at your company. And that starts with just having conversations. And it can be a conversation with 3 people on Crowdcast with, almost 100 people also there, or it can be in the lunchroom. It can be in a conference room, but feel empowered to have those conversations. And I hope folks are able to use do as giving them the ability and the tools and the go ahead to go and have those conversations with their company to start centering the experiences and outcomes for other folks. So I appreciate you all. I will be following up with the $50 to all of the charities that you guys pick. Thank you everyone for joining. Again, Mr. Reverend Nat, thank you for the Sate Citron. It will go well on ice here shortly. And we will see everyone soon. Love y'all. Have a good one. Enjoy this wonderful weather. Bye.